So photography is one of my big interests. I've taught aesthetic photography for quite a while. And so I thought I'd run you through, and hopefully when we get done this, you'll have some, as we've been talking about, vue jedi, of having sort of seen with new eyes of the familiar things you're already familiar with your camera, and start realizing maybe there's some different ways. In fact, some of the injectors I watch are so focused on doing exactly the same thing they've ever always done, they never really get any better because they're still doing it exactly the same way they used to do. Now, if you think about it, if you look at the National Geographic Photo Contest winners in every category every year, and you look up if I wanted to submit a photograph to National Geographic, you'd want to know what the criteria for the winners are. Well, the criteria for all categories is not technique. It's a compelling image. So if you have a compelling image, always trumps technique. So a powerful image makes a statement that is hard to explain what that image does. So if we have, as aesthetic physicians and as aesthetic injectors, we have to have images that are compelling. Now, I would submit to you the soul of the camera is not the camera and not the lens. It's the photographer. It's you. It's who takes the photograph. So the camera is an idiot. It actually has no feelings. It has no idea what you want it to do. And it's like computers, and lasers are actually stupid. The soul of the camera comes from the person that runs the camera. So almost anybody can take pictures, but it's the person that knows how to capture the image that makes the big difference. So you have to use, again, like I talked the other day on Friday night, you have to use head, heart, and hands. The hands will take your photograph, but you have to connect your heart to the patient and try to create that image that you're trying to create. So there's only a few things. I think all of you who take any photos know that the aperture setting is important, the shutter speed is important, and the ISO is important, and just understand those settings on your system. So it doesn't mean you have to be a robot to run the camera, or the opposite, you have to be a psychologist to run it. So you have to have basic understanding of what the lens can do and what the camera can do. And that's part of what we'll talk about a little bit. But the camera sees everything. It doesn't lie. Whereas we talked the other day, the eye sees what it wants to see. So in my experience with doing photography for many, many years, in fact, most of my years doing it is longer than most of you have been alive in this room. So there's 4 categories. If you think about our aesthetic patients, it's more of a psychophotology. So about 10% of our patients own the picture. They just take fantastic pictures. And there's about 15% that just pose. You can't get them to stop posing for the camera. They just have this fixed pose. And about 60% pull back and don't like their pictures taken at all. And 15% are impossible. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So this girl is actually a model from my city, and she's on iStock. She sells her photos on iStock, but she actually lives in my city. Her husband's a patient of mine. So she owns the camera. And this girl is a family physician from a city not far from me that wants to look better, but she won't look at a mirror. She's posed for the picture here, and she actually looks a heck of a lot better than this, but she's posed. And this girl got a negative sort of look because she didn't want to be there. Her mother took her to see me because she got her acne scars. And she's got that. You can't take a really nice photo of this type of patient because she's just got that diminished look. So after we improve her acne scars, and now she's got that healthy self-esteem back, she has that typical smize in the eyes. So we talked earlier, you can actually photograph emotion without animation. So that's an important thing to understand. So here's the ones that are difficult. What I would call PAS patients, photo avoidance syndrome. They don't have any photos to bring into you. They don't collect photos. They don't let people take photos of themselves. And so these patients won't look at my monitor. And I actually don't treat these patients. So we take their photo for the records, but they make horrible aesthetic patients because they don't have any visual perception of what you can do and what's happened to them. So as we talked earlier too, photography means painting with light, writing with light. So with faces, we actually paint with light. So light becomes really crucial of how to avoid shadows that are unappealing. So just a little difference in your light setup can make all the difference. So what I do is I use soft boxes and I use white disc reflectors, but I keep it fairly simple. And if you think about it, photographers that are really good start at an early age, and they understand it. So I use a Rembrandt system. I have a dedicated camera room, and it's not very big, but it has one soft box and one white reflector disc, and the camera I've got mounted so that it's a fixed distance from the patient, and I'll show you the background. And I had a physician recently in my clinic, a plastic surgeon, who his photos are terrible, but one of the reasons is that he has a similar setup, but he moves the camera around by hand instead of moving the patient. So we have a tripod system the patient sits on. It's a Swedish type of chair. The patient swivels in so they don't be moving their head, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So there's a few little things that make a big difference to how you set it up. So that's basically my type of setup. That the backdrop is quite popular now in Photoshops around the world. And this one comes from a firm out of New York. But it looks black and blue, but it's actually a little mottled color. Now we'll just back up here a little bit. Now because we're seeing more and more patients with skin of color, then we have to alter those three settings a little bit. So my system is all manual except for the focus. That's automatic. We have an automatic focus system we've set up, but I adjust all these three settings all the time. But I'm learning more and more that the shutter speed we leave the same, and the aperture setting, that f-stop, instead of changing all the time, we'll often move the patients closer or further away. Even a few inches makes a huge difference because I'm not using a prime lens. So with skin of color patients that are this dark, it's really difficult to take really clear photographs because of the absorption of light. So instead of moving the f-stop all the time, we move the patients a little bit closer and we keep track of where that's at. And so a little bit about the principles of compelling images. And I think it's important to remove all the shadows, get the patient's hair back. We have these scrunchies we use and hair bands, and take the collars off that need to be off, these fur type collars, all those things you would think about. But if you look still in 2017, look at our journals of photographs are pathetic because of no care or focus on photographs. So when we take a minimum of about 10 photographs with each patient, and we can talk about that a little bit if you want. And I can send this program I've got here to those who would like it, so it can help them with their cameras set up. But compelling images attract attention before you read the text. Because if you go to most courses, most of the presentations are text, and nobody ever reads those texts. You can't read it. Your mind goes elsewhere, and you're on your smartphone. And so I would suggest to you cut back, even if you've got lots of things you've done on that patient. Show mostly just the visual, because that's what you want to look at. So if you look at her photo on the left, she's got nice genetics, she's got good genes, but you really can't see her face. So if you take all of the stuff around the neck there and take her front fur off and get her hair back, then suddenly you can see definition. You can see what you want to see. And every patient we do exactly the same way. So there's all kinds of lenses. We have lots of cameras in my clinic. And depends on what we're trying to do. There's only a few that I actually use. So instead of using a prime lens, I'm using a 28-105 Nikon. And most of the time it's set at about 50 millimeter lens. But the prime lenses are not capable of zooming in and out of certain things I want to take photographs of. So I'm fond of, and as Arthur keeps pointing out, there's no exact rules to almost anything we do. And that's particularly true of photography. There's no rules, they're just guidelines. And you get better and better guidelines. We take about 125 photos a day in my clinic, and we have a 4 terabyte hard drive that runs and stores our photographs. And this is the same girl taken with a different lens. Same room, same setting, same camera, everything. The challenge is that either way, whatever way you're taking the picture, the brain interprets it as reality, as a true image. So even though your patient that you're taking a photograph doesn't really look like that necessarily, others you're trying to teach and the patient thinks that's reality. So this girl ran for Miss Canada a few years ago. She's one of my patients. She's a bit of an OCD girl, but she's comes in for trying to make her look perfect. And this is the guidelines I would suggest. There's not lines on the camera system. These are lines you arbitrarily line up with the camera. And there's now most of our camera systems have multiple areas on the face you can set for focus. But years ago, all you could focus on was one focus spot. And if your camera's still that way, then you use the radix of the nose and the zygoma area when you're doing a 3/4 view. And that 3/4 view should be exactly the same every time you take that patient's picture and every patient. The nose on the cheek. And you'll notice all my pictures, if you're being observant at all my pictures are exactly consistent. They're very uniform every time. So that's what I suggest you do, is have some little guidelines you can follow. And if you're doing profiles, which you should do with at least all your pre-treatment patients. And every patient in my clinic that's a consult gets the photos, even if we don't treat them right away. Because if we haven't treated them for 6 months after their consult, we'll send them a note with a copy of a couple of their photographs saying, while you're in, this is what we discussed. If you would like to pursue this a little more, then let us know. Because most patients have no idea how bad they look in a photograph and how reality that is reality. So when they see those photos, they say, oh my goodness, I need to do something. So if you notice, the very tip of the eyelashes on the opposite eye is what you want to see with a profile. So that helps you guide that next photograph of that patient, and also another patient that's going to be fairly consistent with that patient, is that eyelash. So you just barely see that eyelash, and then that's consistent. Now for teaching purposes, I do this a lot, where we'll do before and after a photo, and then we split the photos, and it's sometimes easier for patients to see, and I'll often send these actually to the patient. Say, congratulations, this is what we did, this is what you look like, and this is what I recommend for your maintenance. So you have a little verbiage about that, but you have some photos. And so these are very helpful to kind of teach patients what they've done and what you're trying to accomplish and what you have accomplished. So as we've also discussed, we've never seen ourselves except in a mirror or a photo, unless you're a twin. So mirrors are a very popular thing for generations, but they're difficult because what we see in the mirror is often a little different than what reality is. So the image in the mirror is a little bit different, but that's the reality for us and reality for our patients. So this patient that has the issue with looking in the mirror, that's kind of what she sees when she looks in the mirror. She just doesn't like how she looks. She won't look in the mirror. And she's a smart GP. She just has a really, really poor self-esteem. She lives with her mother and just has some issues. So if you look at Karen, this is one thing I was trying to talk to you about on Friday night. This is her photograph of her before and after. She's stunning. She's beautiful. She's probably like Nicole Kidman. She's locked up in the cellar and never had any sun damage. So she has no sun exposure. She's a sinker. She looks great. This is quite a few years after her. It was about 7 years from her first treatment. But in giving her this photo, she doesn't like the results. She hardly will look at the printed photo, and it prints off beautifully. And so what I do in patients that have this little bit of asymmetry, now watch closely here. This is her photo, and next one is in the mirror. Okay? So I'll go back. Now watch closely. This is what she sees in the mirror. She loves this photo. So you print the mirror image photo and not the photo. So if you go back here now, so here is her photo. That's her photo. So watch, and this is going to be the mirror image of the photo. So subtle difference, but quite a different actually. So to her and to patients that have asymmetry, it's a good little trick for you to actually flip the images, and patients will, surprisingly how they don't see themselves in a photo, they see themselves in a mirror. So with faces, we've been talking ad nausea about each side of the face is not a twin, it's a sibling, it's a sister. But the lips you want to make perfectly symmetrical and balanced upper and lower. So what I did with this patient, because she's so asymmetrical, I made her lips perfectly symmetrical, right and left. So watch. So I've done that now. They're now perfectly symmetrical, they're balanced. So then we split her face, and that's 2 rights, and this is 2 lefts. But look at the lips. So the lips are perfectly symmetrical, and she's not. So which photo does she like? She likes the middle photo. That's how she looks. She doesn't like the asymmetrical nose. And we've gone on now to working on her nose now and a few other little things, but it's subtle. But you keep that lower lip volume, as we've been talking about, no matter the ethnicity of the patient, within the intercanthal distance, so that it looks like a normal lip. And that becomes important to record for your teaching. And all my patients sign consent forms for teaching. So we teach with these files we've been using for you. We use for other patients. In fact, if we're a teaching center, so if patients don't sign a consent form, I often don't treat them because we're a teaching center, and that's what we do. So same with this girl. She's asymmetrical, but her lips are perfectly symmetrical. So that becomes important. So this is one of the reasons I have every patient that's a consult that wants to go on the journey with me is to bring their photos when they're younger, not trying to make her look 23, but I want to see balance, harmony, symmetry or lack of, see what the orbits were like, see what the lips were like. If I hadn't seen her youthful photo, then I would have been tempted to make her upper lip much fuller than it should be genetically. So if you look at her results of her treatments, she now matches the genetic sort of profile, the image of her photo when she was younger. So if you look at what we've done to try to get perfect harmony of the right and left side of the lips. So this is her split face showing 2 rights, 2 lefts just in her before her photos. And she's before her treatments that I did for her and trying to make her more balanced. And so when you try to then create the split image of right and left and look at her lips, are almost perfectly balanced. And the rest of her face is much better as well because you've created harmony and proportions. So you can do this with your own photo just by your I don't have Photoshop, but you can do that. And I do mine on iPhoto and Apple system, Mac system. And just spend a little time doing this. So this is her lips and trying to create that matching pair of what she used to have. So I would suggest, and we've done this in our clinic for a few years very successfully, every patient is assigned a nurse. So that nurse is also the photographic coach. So that patient goes back that nurse goes back with the patient to the photography room, and then she helps instruct us. I used to take all my own pictures, but now I have quite a few of them done by a photographer that's actually one of my assistants. She's been training her for about, probably 8 years now, 6-8 years. So she's very good. So this girl used to be a model, and she's got a few little subtle issues. But I would always get enough room around the photograph so in your aftermarket editing, you can straighten it. So if you have no room around it, you can't straighten it. So when you crop it, straighten it, then you have some room to work with. Now, here's 3 things that you could take home with you that'll make you 90% better than any other clinical photographers. It's an aeronautical type of concept thinking about. So it has to do with roll, pitch, and yaw. So what does that mean in photography terms? So if we look at patients that are doing this, the pitch is up. See, the nose is way above the ear level of the lobe of the ear. And the middle one's good. The bottom one, the pitch is down. So these are 3 things, the pitch, roll, and yaw, that you cannot change with aftermarket editing. No matter what the system is, you can't change that. No matter how you're trying to crop them or work with them. So the roll is rolling to the left or the right, where patients just roll. And we always have my assistants stand behind the patients to get their head straight and parallel, because the tendency is to raise their chin up and also to roll one side. So that's roll. Yaw is, if you look at most photographs, aesthetic photographs that are in journals, you can't even hardly see one ear, because the patient is rotated a little bit to the right or to the left. So the tip off is to make sure you can see those patients' ears, and make sure you can see their earrings if you're going to have them wear them. It's like the middle picture there is right on. And then the left one and the right one are rotated slightly. Their body's rotated, and that's called yaw. So you can't correct that in aftermarketing. So we've talked a lot about the OG curve concept, and now we actually do an OG kind of photograph. So you rotate the patient a little bit to see the curvature of the cheek and the orbit, and it's what I call the OG view. So you can actually use that for lots of different reasons with your aesthetic photography. So the worm's eye view is thinking about a worm looking up. So there's a number of different things we want to capture on your camera system by looking at the worm's eye view. So it's an uncommon view you may not have thought about too much, but we've been doing these very common nasal valve issues, and they're hard to photograph unless you do a worm's eye view. So as you do that and have the head tilted back, see this girl on your left is worm's eye view of breathing, sucking in, and that's immediately post-treatment, and just showing that so we have them come back into the camera room. We also do videos of those as well. So we have a camera system, I think one we're using now is a Nikon D750 that has 2 cards. One's the camera card and one's the video card. We use the video card in a lot. So just capturing little videos of animation. And we also use these plastic inserts for all of our masseter patients that are squishing their teeth and cracking teeth, and with the attrition and arbitration that happens with their teeth. So we record that so it's there. And so this is that concept we talked about a little bit yesterday, with that part of the deep part of the masseter that comes under the mandible. And you can't see that unless you have a worm's eye view. You don't notice it. So it's important to understand that. Now, if you're doing Kybella, Bella Kyra is the same name in Canada. We've done a lot of photographic studies for Allergan. And when you tell patients to grimace, they have no idea what grimace means. So you want that kind of view. There's a whole bunch of views we do for Kybella. But we actually print this type of picture off. It's actually in my camera room. You print it off so that patients know what grimace means, so they can mimic that. They could be a mimicker. So sometimes your staff can't mimic it, but you can have a photograph to show it. So we scan the patients. This is one of the most important things I do in my clinic, is have these photos brought in. And my nurses are very good at it. My staff's very good at it, of helping patients decide what photograph they're going to bring. And then what we do is we take those photos, usually in their 20s and 30s, and I'll show you what I do. So I've already taken this patient's photo when she first came in. So she brings back her photos the next visit to our clinic. She's 54, and she brings this photo that's 27. So you want to replicate the view that she had at 27, the same angle, same pose, so everything is matching. So you just take the time to replicate that picture. And then you can also do other views as well to try to show what's happening and why she shouldn't be focusing on her nasolabial fold, because she's got lots of other issues. And once patients see these photos with their other photos, they start to understand why we approach the full face and neck. So the same thing with this photo that she brought in, that's a smiley photo at 17, then we repeat the same degree of animation. Because smiling, as all of you know, is the most difficult thing to capture with a photograph, because people do either a feigned smile or a smirk, and it's hard to capture that. Then you can use these, print these off or have them on your monitor. We put them on our monitors. We have monitors in all our rooms. And then we use the monitors to kind of show patients what's happening to their aging face and gently show them why you don't treat just the nasolabial fold, why you want to treat this whole structure of the face. And this is this whole dynamics we've been talking about with imbalance of tissue resistance and muscle. And you understand that more, and patients start to understand it. And you educate them, then that's why you can go and treat these patients more thoroughly by addressing all of their issues, all 5 Ds. So a smile is the most difficult part to, I think, replicate, because there's a spontaneous smile, a posed smile, Joe Biden smirk type of thing, and these different smiles are difficult to replicate. But you can look at this. There's lots of studies done on how to create the proper look with smiling. Usually we try with patients, because most patients are pretty stiff when you're trying to take their photograph. So I usually tell them some dumb joke. I've usually always got one or two that can make them laugh, and it has to be spontaneous. So you do a social smile, and then you do a spontaneous smile as well, and that becomes important. So that's the commissurer smile. We have lots of patients that we see, lots of people I saw in this audience that just have a commissurer smile. That's just genetically your smile. So, and some people have this spontaneous smile, and their smile that's social is different. And so Julia Roberts has got that classic Duchenne kind of spontaneous smile. That's what you like to replicate with your photographs. And Duchenne, you could look this up for yourself, the literature about Duchenne smile, and there's even some societies that will try to teach that smile. And this is actually reality. They try to teach the same type of smile, so you smile from your eyes as well. So this is that Pan Am smile before most of you were born. That was the typical sort of artificial smile from the mouth kind of thing. So these are typical Botox smiles. Unfortunately, that's the name for it. We have no animation, no activation of the orbicularis muscle at all. And we were talking with one of my groups a little while ago with the number one cause of temporal hollowing is Botox, because it shrinks the temporalis muscle. It's used for headaches over and over and over. I have patients that are going to different clinics, neurologists, wherever they're going, they're having their headaches treated the wrong zones, getting all in the temporalis muscle anteriorly for the anterior band. There's an anterior posterior band of the temporalis muscle, and you get the anterior bands there, and you get this amazing atrophy. Just a side thought for you. So the commissurer smile is not a very appealing smile. Social smiles are great, but the spontaneous smile is the one you try to record as well. So it can be all in the same patient. You want a subtle smile, social smile, and that spontaneous smile. And I showed this before, but I want to emphasize one of the features of the aging face is that closing of the eyes. So as you smile, your eyes get tighter and tighter, and your palpebral fissure gets narrower. It's an aging feature. So without any surgery, you can actually create a nice spontaneous smile without having to look frozen. So there's little ways to teach that, and this is one of the reasons you take photographs. So your photographs could be used for the teaching and for records as well. So in closing, this last slide, if you just look at it here, as I've just said, your head prompts you to point the camera in hopefully the right direction, and your heart zooms in on that compelling image that you're trying to capture from the patient, and then your hands send the message to focus and take the picture. You get 2 out of those 3, you just have a photograph. If you get 3 out of 3, you have a compelling image. Thank you very much.